Shalom, I'm Dr. Dina Dye with Foundations in Torah. Welcome to this week's portion, Chayai Sarah. So Sarah is one of the only women in the Bible that actually has the number of years counted. And of course, her number of years is 127, and in this particular portion, it's separated into three groups. So we have 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years. Now, the 100 is actually in the singular, and so is the 20, so it's shana, year. But the 7 years is in the plural, shanim. It's kind of interesting. We find in this portion as well that Abraham, it says, wailed, bewailed, or wept over her. And the word there, baka, has the letter kaf in it is diminished. So that's kind of interesting. The rabbis have their theories on why the letter kaf is diminished. The letter kaf has the value of 20, and it usually represents a palm. And I'll talk about that, in my opinion, in just a second. Now, we know this all takes place in Kiryat Arba, which means the city of four, in the town of Hebron. They're actually one and the same. Hebron means a friend, but the idea is something that joins together to become a friend. So there's something being intimated in this relationship in this cave where she will be buried in the field that was given, or that Abraham purchased from Ephron. Now also the cave is called Macpelah, which means a double. So we got a whole lot of two double thing going on here. And the cave, actually this sort of portion here out of Chayai Sarah really has a lot of temple imagery. And of course, that's been my focus, and that will be my focus today as well. But the idea of the cave is actually a metaphor for the inner chamber of the temple. So the temple had various symbols and imagery that went with it. One was the mountain, which we associate with Abraham. One was the field, which we associate with Isaac, and also the house, which is associated with Jacob. Typically, in the ancient cultures, mountains were temples. Temples were built on top of mountains, and there was always an inner chamber where the god and his consort would go in to consummate their marriage. So the inner chamber actually comes to represent the world outside of time in the temple. So it's the world beyond the curtain, beyond the Holy of Holies, and it is the world outside the dimension of time. So we have these two things going on here, and I think there's something being conveyed there in the value of the number of how many years Sarah lived, the 100, the 20, and the 7. Typically in Scripture, 100 or 1 or 10 or 1,000 represents a completed community, and that community has as its leader God, if you will. So that is the restored whole community. The number 20 or 2 or 2,000 or 200 typically represents the concept of exile outside the camp or outside the temple. So when Jacob goes out to Padan Aram to Lavan to get his wife, he's gone for 20 years, signifying he's outside the land, which is the camp, which represents the temple, for that period of time. And then we have the number 7, so 120 and 7, the number 7 representing, I think, the conclusion, of course, of the creation week, the 7th day, the Shabbat, the world outside of time, when the world outside of time and the world inside of time become one. So the message of the creation week is, and the process of creation is always about separation and restoration, or separation and a unity. That is the whole process of creation. So things are separated in order to have a relationship to come back together and be one. So there'll be a restoration of the heavens and the earth, and in terms of the body and the spirit, and in terms of Sarah and Abraham, they will be restored. And the place that they'll be restored is in the Holy of Holies, that is represented by the cave. So inside a mountain you have a cave, so inside the temple you have the Holy of Holies. And I think this is kind of the message that's being conveyed here through the life of Sarah. Now it talks about in Genesis 6:3 that my spirit will not strive with man forever, and his days will be numbered at 120. And so we have this 120 again, I think, representing the physical world. And of course, Sarah lives to be 127, the 7 representing the world to come when all things will be restored. Now, Hebron, of course, is a real place in Israel. It is south of Jerusalem in the Judean wilderness. But I think that there is also something being communicated symbolically that Hebron also represents the temple and the Temple Mount. Now, it's interesting when we look at this story that Abraham is going to purchase a burial plot that is a field that has a cave in it from someone named Ephron. He's going to purchase it for 400 shekels. And that is the first time we see in Scripture that someone of Abraham has actually bought land, real estate in the land of Israel. Now, the other example, of course, we have is King David. Of course, David ruled over Hebron for 7 years. There's our picture again. And David purchased the threshing floor that was on top of Mount Moriah for the building of the temple, and he purchased that for, in one place it says 600 shekels. So now, again, these two places have been purchased. And we think about the redemption price. So let me jump ahead here and look at Ephron for just a second. So the value of Ephron's name is 406. However, we have one example in this narrative where the letter Vav is removed, which has a value of 6. So the value of Ephron's name is 400. So now we have Abraham purchasing the field with the cave, representing the temple and the inner chamber, for 400 shekels. We have Ephron's name and value being 400. And if we go back to Genesis 15, if you'll recall the covenant between the parts, when God is establishing his covenant with Abraham, he tells them that your offspring will live in a land foreign, they will be foreigners in a land, and that land will oppress them for 400 years. So there's something with all of this that has to do with the purchase or the redemption price found in the value of 400. So I don't want to get too bogged down here in the numbers, but again, I see this all as this restoration. The curtain is removed from the Holy of Holies, and the two are restored and become one. Now, the Kiryat Arba means the city of four, and the sages tell us that the cave of Mount Macpelah is the secret entrance to Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, and that inside that cave were actually 4 couples that were buried there. So we know as Abraham and Sarah, and we have Isaac and Rebekah, and we have Jacob and Leah, and then Rachel's buried in another location, but also Adam and Eve, these 4 couples, because it's all about restoring the house, the unity of the house, the unity of the one day when everything will return to that. So as I looked at this and I was thinking about the world outside of time and the world in which we live in, and the message that comes to me is that how can we live in this world but act like we are members of the world to come, or act that in our life we are giving expression to the world outside the dimension of time. And something in the Torah just talks about doing acts of kindness or doing good deeds. And I think that is a key. Now, I'm not saying that your salvation comes from doing good deeds, but once you have been saved, if you will, and delivered and set free and been paid for by the redemption money, you have an obligation to walk in the ways of the Torah, and that is to help the poor and to help those in need and those in distress. And this is a message for our day and our time, because we live in a time where there is so much division, and acts of kindness bring unity and bring healing and bring restoration. A kind word, a smile, and to help one another in some small way or some big way. This is what God has called us to do, to be different, to be transformative in this time, in this season when there is so much hate and so much violence and division and death. How we respond, that we give the gift of life, as I said, in a kind word, or we help widows and orphans, or help those in our community, help the poor in whatever way we can find, whatever way you can find to do good works and to serve, because that ultimately is the message of the temple. The message of the temple is that is the place that we serve one another, and we bring healing and we bring restoration, and in that service I think we'll see the unity of the body and the restoration of the culture at large. So do good things and say kind words, and let us see the kingdom being built. Shalom. See you next time.